Welcome, everyone, to Your Desk University, bringing you live learning with AEC tech experts directly to your desk. Definitely. Our goal is to provide really high quality content for the computational designer, software developer spectrum in the AEC industry, everyone from a fairly advanced visual programmer all the way into someone who's doing add-in development, but not quite a full software developer. If you enjoy it, go ahead definitely and hit the like button on YouTube so other people know to join us. Tonight, we're going to be speaking about the top 10, actually, the top 12 things in Dynamo that you have missed along the way. Want to really understand element binding, where elements sometimes get updated, or other things like list at level? Maybe you're an expert on one of these, but do you really know all 12? We have Amour, wave to us so we know who that is. He's a Kiwi. That means he was born not in New Jersey and not in New York, but in New Zealand. He's lived in 5 countries and traveled to 10 times that many. Can you guess what he enjoys doing in his spare time? Jacob Small, he has an unhealthy obsession with reading every first post on every Dynamo post on the forum within 30-hour window. And I think he must have heard some kind of fake news because he's taking this social distancing very different. And he's not 6 feet away, but 6 time zones away from his home office in Stockholm. Jacob, thank you for joining with us virtually, along with, wow, all these great people in the chat. Can't wait to say hi to you. Before you guys get started with your presentation about the 12 things in Dynamo people may have missed, can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are with your careers at Autodesk?
Sure. So I'll kick off. Hello, everyone. I'm Sol. Thanks for the introduction,
Thanks, Sol.
Timon.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. I'm like I said, and well, you said in my little blurb, I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, and I get really curious about life. So I've probably had about 14 different. Sorry,
Yep.
There's a bit of reverb going on. 14 different careers, so to speak, across my time since I graduated. Dabbled mostly in the design field, but across a few others as well. So. I guess I started my Dynamo journey around about 5-6 different years ago, and just got really curious and started pushing things, started publishing, started talking to a lot of different people, started presenting in different places. I actually posted my entire life journey on Twitter in a tweet around about like 10 days ago or something, so you can go on it if you want to. But it's been fun, I guess. So I've just been curious, and that curiosity has taken me places, and then eventually has taken me here to Boston and Autodesk. I've managed to actually jump the fence from, I was living in Canada for a year and a half on the day that the borders closed, so just snuck in.
Yeah.
And my journey's been a little bit different, I guess. Trained as an architect, designed buildings and pretty much only buildings, but all kinds of buildings for about 10 or 11 years out of college. From there, shortly before joining Autodesk, maybe 5 or 6 years back, I started getting really involved in the Dynamo community through the forum, helping out as many people as I could because I saw that I was gaining a lot of knowledge from some of the sort of forerunners within that space. And I managed to take the knowledge that I got there and spread it larger through the community. And as a result of that, one of my former coworkers said, I think you'd be a really good fit for a job at Autodesk. How'd you like to come work with us? And I picked it up and just ran with it. And it's been a blast ever since.
Nice. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you both for being here. I know our group is really looking forward to what you guys have to share with us. So go ahead and take it away. I know, was it 12, 10? I know 12 tips in 30 minutes. This is going to be a heck of a ride, right?
Yeah, we're gonna go fast, so hold your breath.
All right, let's go for it.
Okay, let me just share. Cool. Are we good to go?
You're good.
Looks good to me.
So you guys have already really got an introduction. This is me. This is my face. I like wearing a Russian hat sometimes, so I also get curious at parties and put glow sticks in.
That's the face everyone really knows you as.
Yeah, this is my Twitter profile. The hat is pretty synonymous with my own personal brand.
Yeah, and you also got my kind of background. Typically, I don't travel as much as Sol, but when I do always try to take one really bad selfie, and this was my one in Hong Kong. So there it is for the world to see.
Cool. So, like as with any Autodesk presentation, we are obliged to give a safe harbor statement at the start of any presentation. So the basic premise of this is please don't make any purchasing decisions on what you see today. And we're not really going to present anything that is future looking, but things are subject to change, yada, yada, yada.
And really that can be boiled down from all those words to just these few. Butterfly springs forth. We know not where it'll land next. Buy on location now.
Cool. Awesome haiku.
All right, so this is kind of the agenda of what we're going to be covering today. First up is sort of plan out what we want to do. So we want to talk about having a map and understand where we're going, making sure we're documenting our stuff, visualizing the logic. We want to talk also about reducing confusion, so making sure that we're explaining it well. Talk about element binding, because that is still to this day a very confusing topic. Go over list lacing and levels, which are often misunderstood. Then talk about how we can save time by working with simpler data types and reducing trips to the well. Then talk about increasing value by enabling your other users, increasing accessibility, and breaking things as you go before going into extensibility and how to continue your journey. And then talk about some resources, questions, and next steps.
Yeah, and apologize for any typos in this presentation as we move forward.
All right. So first up, we want to make sure you have a map. What you can see right here is literally, this is my process for building most of my good graphs. I plan through what I want to do, grabbing the initial content, what that means, and then figure out where I would go from there. So as this animation sort of loops over and over, you can sort of see how each one of those numbers corresponds to a spot on the graph where I'm actually going to record something. And you can see the number 4 aligns to the number 4 within those other slides. This really helps you make sure that you're staying on track and keeps you going where you want to be, and provides the added benefit of if you ever get sidetracked because the phone rings or because the sprinkler head went off at the project and now somebody's got to go out and talk about how to fix everything, you can still do that and come back and pick up where you left off without having to rebuild the entire train of thought as far back.
Cool. And then after you have a map, you really want to document your stuff appropriately. So this is not only for yourself, but this is for your colleagues as well. If you take a project, leave it for 6 months, come back to it, chances are likely it's not really going to make sense to you. So again, we'll have a series of looping GIFs in this presentation. This is just talking about the kind of steps I personally take and that I think are relevant to documentation within Dynamo. So we're talking about steps where you're utilizing some of the documentation features inside of the product. This is things like groups, naming groups, adding in a template at the front end of them, adding in some sort of like logical notes and logical steps, using the Control L or graph layout feature that we have inside of Dynamo to automatically help you do this. It also works within groups itself. And then also one sort of key concept as well at the tail end of this is you don't really want to have a whole bunch of different things sitting on top of each other from, say, a geometrical perspective. You want to have only the relevant things shown at any point in time. So at the tail end of this, you definitely want to start hiding geometry that you do not want to see. This also has the added benefit of not having to be rendered on screen, so you get some minute speed increases on this one too. You're muted, Jacob.
Of course, it was bound to happen. All right. So the next piece.
What happened? Nice catch, Saul.
Next piece, you want to make sure that as you go through, you're able to visualize the logic as well as possible. I can't tell you how many times I wind up trying to help somebody troubleshoot a graph that looks like that one up on the top left, where you can sort of follow that bouncing marble through this massive tangle of wires. If you take the time to actually organize your graph, you can take something that's really complex and simple and build out that consistent logic flow. Great tip there is to use code blocks to sort of help organize stuff so that you don't have to worry about so many crisscrossing wires, and also try gathering stuff into dictionaries. I've also found there's some pretty good time saving there as well.
And if you follow your first step on like first using words to like explain what you're going to be doing, it makes it a lot easier to then like lay it out into like steps.
Absolutely.
All right, so another sort of key concept that we talk about here is around explaining the concepts of what you're trying to achieve. And so if you're utilizing something such as a template, you can use this like 30-second elevator pitch idea, which could be the description of your template. So in essence, what you want to do is try and distill the idea of your graph into a really small bite-sized chunk. So in this case, an elevator pitch, which can explain in around about 30 seconds or so exactly what's happening in your graph. So when somebody picks it up, they know the intent of what you had when you generated it at the outset. And this can go hand in hand as well with sort of like a visual story. So in this particular case, we're talking about a visual story that showcases in a geometrical perspective what is bad, highlighted here in red or green. And so the premise really is, if you cannot yourself explain it simply enough, then you do not know what you're trying to do. And if you do not know what you're trying to do, it's going to cause confusion for somebody else who tries to pick it up.
Next piece we wanted to talk about is element binding. This is far and away the most frequent flyer, I think, on the Dynamo forums in terms of I don't get it. And it's really hard to understand. I do have a great AU class on this, and there's a link a little bit further on here. But effectively what you can see is if you've built your graph correctly and you're leveraging element bindings, the instance parameters that you've applied to your content can be maintained as you have to update your graph. So I've got my content that's been previously placed by my other graph, previous run, go ahead and open that same graph. This is only family instance by point, using that one node, adjusting that spline that's driving the rest of my content. And then I'm going to go ahead and click run, and you're going to see much of that content is maintained. I don't have to worry about going back and modifying instance parameters that have been built out to the rest of the content, which reduces the amount of time we have to sort of spend updating all our other documentation. This includes stuff that's hosted on those elements, like dimensions and annotations as well, which is really, really handy.
Is there some way somebody can know whether a node has element binding with it?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. Sol, can you check out the next slide for me?
Oh no, look, we're already there. That was not set up, everyone. That was a legitimate question.
So when you look here, this has a pretty good breakdown, and this is primary. And I do recommend people, specifically Dynamo experts that we're discussing, showing this off to, take the time to build up a test that allows you to sort of understand what these pieces mean. Build something that does some basic placement like that, and try it out. Try it out with a Python node, 2DS true, 2DS false. All of this sort of matters. Partial binding means it's going to work. But it's not necessarily going to update your instance parameters. It's going to relocate the content, but not change the value or not maintain the previously created values. So yeah, pretty good bit of info there. One caveat, watch out for Civil 3D where element binding is a little bit different. So this next piece is about working with list lacing and levels. So you saw that first graph, this second graph. These two graphs do the exact same thing. There's no difference between the two, except one's much faster by about 3%. For something as simple as this. One's much easier to find the piece that has a misspelling in it, which I'm prone to do. And one actually has a drastically smaller file size, and it's the one on the right. So we've got slower runs versus faster runs. We've got harder troubleshooting versus easier troubleshooting. We've got larger file size versus smaller size. Everything's pointing at the one on the right, but I see so much of that one on the left, and I don't understand why. I think it's because there's pretty wire patterns versus dull wire patterns. I'm not sure. I'd love to know if anybody has any insight there. So if you could go ahead and flip to the next one. You do want to take advantage of list lacing whenever you can. This is the basics of it. So we've got shortest lacing, where we use items from both lists until one stream runs dry, and then we move on to the next node. Longest lacing, reuse the last item in the shortest list until all streams have run dry. Cross-product lacing, put every item in every list against every other item in the other list. And then auto lacing, which defaults to shortest lacing unless a singleton is passed, in which case it goes over to longest. Those can be a little bit difficult to work out, so I do recommend taking the time to build out a graph. There we go. That is silly as this, as simple as this is, it's effectively some Dr. Seuss math. We're going to take a blank canvas of an elephant and a fish, mix it together with a bunch of different colors, shortest lacing, we get a red elephant and an orange fish, right? We change that over to longest lacing, elephant, fish, list of colors. We're going to reuse that fish over and over and over again until we run out of colors, right? That's how that looks in graph form. Cross-product lacing, we're going to mix every animal against every color, right? So we've got a bunch of groups of animals grouped by color, which can be really handy. But if you did want something like that, also possible to take advantage of list at level, where we could set our colors to at level 1. It's going to default longest lacing with our auto lacing, and then we've got everything grouped by color as opposed to grouped by animal instead of by color. Sorry, got that backwards. On to you, Sol.
All right, so we also want to explain how you can get some faster geometry or faster data inside of Dynamo. So there is a data types hierarchy here that is prevalent within the Dynamo primer, and of this data types hierarchy, there's two different sections. There's abstract and geometry, or abstract geometry and real geometry, as the case may be. And so if you stay left in that data types hierarchy, you will be using more abstract geometry, such as vectors, such as planes, such as coordinate systems and translations. And these are way, way faster than geometry is. So a small, simple case that you see on my screen right now that is looping, we're talking about 43 times faster in terms of execution time for using mostly abstract geometry instead of mostly real geometry types. And so think about this as a very small graph. So the comparative time here saved is going to be exponentially greater on a really complex graph if you are running with geometry. So remember that small scale doesn't equal large scale. So you're going to gain more gains or get more gains, as the case may be, by including more abstract geometry types within your sort of Dynamo graphs that utilize and use geometry.
Now, I may have missed it at the beginning, but what is an abstract geometry versus a real geometry?
So abstract is things like coordinate systems, vectors, like things that don't show up as like real physical, quote unquote, tangible objects in the back preview. So it's stuff you kind of have to it's like mathy stuff, things you have to sort of
So would you consider
conceptualize as
points and
opposed to see.
lines also part of that abstract geometry?
No, those are more like sort of simple
Previewable.
geometry
Gotcha.
primitives.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you stay into the more math-orientated sort of translations and nodal functions, then you're going to be working faster than if you have to actually render that geometry inside of the background preview.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So every single node also tangentially that you run in Dynamo that has geometry is going to hold that in memory. So the less nodes that hold actual physical geometry, the faster Dynamo is going to be. And so beyond that, we also want to reduce trips to the well. So in this kind of case, instead of getting a tiny little bucket and filling it up with water, why don't you take a water tanker? And so this manifests itself out of Dynamo as, instead of copy and pasting a bunch of different things that you're doing again and again and again, especially if you're talking to a host, so the create, the modify, the change events, the delete events inside of something such as Revit, you want to just try and get that stuff once. And so if you've already pulled that information, then just utilize that information again. You can utilize things like dictionaries or a bunch of different filtration nodes that we have to get you to the right place faster. And so you will notice that there is a speed hit every single time you go back to sort of Revit in this kind of case. It's not crazy in this little use case, and in some of your sort of day-to-day use cases won't be bad. But if you have a graph that is running and takes 10 plus 20, 30 minutes to run and execute, if you start using some of these tactics, it's going to start drastically saving you some time.
All right, so the next piece is we want to make sure that we're enabling the users. Towards that end, Dynamo has three primary goals: to provide a simple, collaborative tool that works for every level of ability. By simple, you can think of it like Thing and Explainer, the great book by Randall Munroe. Shakespeare speak on the left, cavemen speak on the right. Both get the message across. Next way to think about it is the collaborative nature, right? We've got a great community that shares tons of packages and has an amazing forum with tons of solution and content out there. And beyond that is every level of ability. We want to make sure that every user who wants to can take advantage of some aspect of Dynamo. Doesn't matter if you're writing full code, if you're using a pre-produced custom node, or even just leveraging Dynamo Player. We want to make sure that it's there so that you get that same result, whichever direction you're coming at it from. Towards that end, we want to make sure that you guys are taking the time to enable as many of your peers as possible, right? So you want to make sure everyone has the tools, right? Everyone has access to Dynamo 2.0.3. If you're still stuck on 1.3.4, it's time to upgrade. Do whatever you can to convince the IT team to do that. So much great stuff that you're just handcuffed by not having access to. Also 2019, Revit 2020, and Revit 2021. Yes, get that out there so you can start taking advantage of the great new features in generative design for Revit today, as opposed to waiting until that first point release, because by that point, your competition's already 6 to 8 months ahead of you. Next up, we want to make sure everybody has standard packages for the offices and all the associated view extensions, that everyone has access to all of everyone else's in-process content. There's a common repository for people to work out of, and that you have access to the documentation and test data sets to work with those as well. You also want to provide a form so that there's a kind of a graph request board, periodic meetings and stuff like that. Have an open, structured process in place in order for people to join up in sprints and stuff like that, and make sure that you're identifying content. The Binoculars view extension is amazing for that because it lets you know when people are running a graph and kind of what content that they're accessing with it. So definitely want to plug that one. Then you want to also make sure you're enabling users beyond just the office. So you want to try and host or participate in user groups as often as possible. Also take the time to ask questions in a public forum. Don't just sort of sit around and wait or try and submit a ticket to Autodesk support. We'll do our best to help you out. Even odds it'll make its way over to my desk. I'll help out as best I can, but you're going to get so much more, and the larger community is also going to grow if you take the time to ask in a public forum. Also, go to hackathons. People don't do this enough. There's so much that you can learn by just going to one of those, and make sure to look for and train not just other users, but also your replacements. If you're one person against infinite problems, you're not really going to solve it all. But if you have an army at your back, you're going to solve a lot more. We'll wrap it up there.
Right. And so another sort of note on that is your work is only really valuable if it's accessible. So what you can do is you can make more packages, you can leverage GitHub repos, but you have to talk about what you're doing for people to really know what you're up to, right? So talk about it. It's as simple as that. What we want you to do really is to let your colleagues know what you're up to, let the broader community know what you're up to, show what you're doing, and get another voice to come and check out the content that you're creating. You can share it in products, you can share it through external sources such as GitHub. Open source is trendy right now, everybody's doing it. And the reason that it's really important is because you can get it in front of other people, and more eyes on what you're doing will make for a better product at the end of the day. We talk about things like edge cases, we talk about one graph running really well on the project that you generated on, and then you take it to your next project and it falls over. Like getting more eyes on this faster, getting different perspectives, different frames of mind, people potentially with more experience, or even people with less experience can be very valuable in showcasing potential problems that your graph might run into in the future.
All right, next up, we want to make sure we're breaking our graphs as I go, which sounds crazy, but let's say we had a graph to renumber elements based on their Y location in a given sector, right? So basic graph up there, content there, stuff numbers pretty well, right? We've got 2.1, 2.2, pretty straightforward. It works on my test data set in both sector 2 and sector 4. Things are happy, go ahead and roll it out to the end users, right? Well, winds up that the end users actually drew their sectors so that there's a lot of overlap. So sector 2 works out good because all the doors are centered in that sector, but sector 3, 4 has some overlap. Doors are in 2 sectors, so we get question mark 1, 2, 3, doesn't work. So we want to get as much instant feedback as possible and think through these things in advance before we roll it out. Once you've gotten the users to sort of update their scope boxes, you can go forth and just run that graph. Well, what if we wanted to use it on rooms? Well, we've got a whole bunch of rooms that aren't bound. We've got rooms likely that aren't placed and things like that. And so you want to sort of think those pieces through. As I change this over to rooms and hit run, notice nothing happens. So now an inexperienced user potentially inexperienced user has to know to go in and hit the edit button. Graph opens up in Dynamo. They have to know to go ahead and change the dropdown manually, even though it was already changed once in Player, and then work its way over to all that other content and figure out where the problem is. What is actually keeping this from running? It can be a very, very daunting task. So we want to make sure that we are doing as much as possible to sort of minimize the amount of content that is sort of being reworked. Towards that end, as we go a little bit further, and of course my GIF is a little bit too slow for the speed at which I'm talking. I tend to talk way too fast. We get the Y values. We've grouped everything together. I'm being told to take a breath. From there, we finally find the actual problem in terms of why stuff's not updating. The previous stuff had a mark value. Rooms have a number value. So the user has to know to change that stuff through. If we took the time to think that through in advance, we would have saved this headache and the user just would have been able to go through. So here's an incomplete list, and we'll make sure that we get this distributed a little bit better because it's a lot to read through, but an incomplete list of things to think about. If a category changed, if a room doesn't, or an element doesn't have location data, if there's no geometry, if it's a different data type, content like that has lots of bearing on whether or not stuff will work long-term, and you have to plan for that in advance.
Right, and so to sort of tail off, continue the journey beyond Dynamo as well, even though your colleagues might not. So potentially you have explored design script inside of Dynamo, so maybe now it is time to start dabbling in something such as Python, or maybe it is time to go beyond that to explore the zero-touch world and start jumping into C#. Maybe that's a little bit daunting, and even if it is, it doesn't really matter, because the premise here is that if you continue your education, It's ultimately really about learning with the end goal of being understanding. So the more you learn, even if you don't necessarily use Python or use C#, gives you a broader understanding of what Dynamo is and how it functions and how it works. So akin to any program, Revit included here, when you start to think about how the developers think and you start to understand the trade-offs and the decisions that get made when building software, you'll learn how to wrangle it better. And so you'll come across a problem you might not have experienced before, and you'll be able to self-solve that at way more speed than previous. So to finish off,
that was awesome. That was awesome. Was that
questions,
12?
resource, and next
Is
step.
that 12? I lost count. I lost count.
I believe it's 12. We're trying to go fast.
I thought it was maybe 20. Keep going, Sol.
All right. So before we finish, we just wanted to make a little announcement here. So Jacob and myself, as well as some members of the Dynamo team and other members of the sort of Dynamo knowledge world inside of Autodesk, are going to create a Dynamo office hours. So this is going to be kicked off in the not too distant future. We haven't quite got a date set yet, but expect some sort of communication about this. And the intent here is to have basically an hour-long window fortnightly for a touch base with us. So you can come to us, you can ask those sort of really hairy, nebulous questions, and also please do at the end of this presentation today. We're going to try and straddle as much of the world as possible, but we do live here in the east of the US, so we're going to do one morning session in one fortnight, followed by the following fortnight being an afternoon session.
So for those of us who don't know what a fortnight is.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
Basically, yes.
Okay.
So a fortnight means every 2 weeks. And so in essence, every 2 weeks, we're going to flip the morning versus the early evening to do this Dynamo.
Now, we are an international group, so I'm sure some people on there are going, what do you mean, Tim, and you don't understand that? So I'm with you.
What is the age-old adage? If you learn something new every day, that's the whole point of life, right? Anyway, so the format of this is going to be, in essence, a 15-minute presentation at the start aimed more at beginners. So sort of contrasting with Autodesk University, which is more sort of advanced users, expert level users, technology. We're going to be aiming this more at the beginners. We're going to have a series of different things we're going to present for about 15 minutes at the outset. Then we're just going to open up to general Q&A. And if many people don't have questions, we'll have a second 15-minute presentation pre-canned to be able to drop. And all of these will be available on YouTube as well. So if you cannot make those at any point in time, they will be on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. And sorry, all the viewers, we've had 2 little blackouts on the screen, but you haven't missed anything. So your audio's been just great through it.
Good to hear. One more last thing we wanted to sort of pass on before we go on to questions. We wanted to give you guys some learning resources so you can continue to grow. First up, we've got kind of your basic Dynamo stuff. So Dynamo info and news, dynamobim.org is the homepage, but definitely go to the blog. I am in there like 3 or 4 times a day, just passing on links. So definitely take the time to read that. There's tons of great info there. Also, if you're using an older version of Revit, so 2019 or prior, you probably want to go to dynamobuilds.com and get 2.0.3 so you can get that current from 2020 on. Those are tied into your Revit installation, so please don't try and put Dynamo 2.5 and Revit 2019. It mostly just breaks things. From there, we've also got the GitHub, which is a great resource to be able to talk to Autodesk development team and let us know about issues that you may have, or even help us grow the software and introduce new functionalities. From there, some great resources for learning. We've got the Dynamo Primer, which is kind of a great sort of self-paced guideline to be able to learn Dynamo from scratch. Dynamo Forums, which is the place to go if you have a question. You can typically Google it and somebody has already asked it. If not, they've asked a version of it. And if not, please ask it. I will probably read it in the next 30 hours. I may not respond, but I will read it. The Dynamo Dictionary is another great place to go. It shows you how to use almost every out-of-the-box node that comes with Dynamo and Dynamo Revit, and always under development as well. And then dynamonodes.com, third-party site not hosted by Autodesk, that explains how to use those third-party packages that we all know and love. From there, we've got DesignScript, information there on the DesignScript language summary and the DesignScript language guide, and the great presentation by Sol from, I believe that was one of your built courses, is that correct?
Yeah,
or maybe it was AU?
Built in Slovenia in 2018, I think.
Cool. So DesignScript course there is another great resource. So those 3 are kind of my go-tos for that. Some great resources on Dynamo Python, primarily aimed at Revit usage, but you can learn a lot from that for application to our other integrations as well. And then some information on generative design. I do want to plug the generativedesign.org because the primer up there is amazing and has tons of great information on how to use some amazing new nodes.
Cool. And I just want to add in a couple of points here. So the blog, we've sort of reinvigorated the blog over the last year and a half. There's probably authored myself, maybe 20 different blog posts. There's another sort of 20 on top of that. So there's a lot of really quality content. So I would encourage you guys to go and read that if you do not. Also on that kind of note, if you are following our GitHub, you might be familiar with the fact that we're now investing in Python 3 as well, beyond Python 2, which exists inside of Dynamo today. So some of those Python examples may or may not be outdated in the not too distant future, but we will have some awesome migration content to help you out on that front as well. So without further ado, we have question time.
We do. Yes, we have lots of questions. So first we had a question about our Slack channel and the link for it. Sorry, we're not going to be posting that in the chat here just because it changes. So it's on our website, yourdeskuniversity.com. You can find it there. All right. Next question we had, actually it was a question from me to the chat, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts as well. Do you have any tools you use for flowcharts, for creating diagrams? Draw.io was suggested, and a couple other ones. But what are yours?
I would use Creately, Creately.com. It's one I found recently. It's actually really good. I have used Draw.io in the past. I think Creately is slightly less clunky.
Nice.
My tool of choice is actually probably the one thing I miss of my office in Boston beyond the people is a massive whiteboard behind my desk that is always just scribbled all over. I have found that I'm using a lot of Mural for now to sort of replicate that, as well as a lot of just Sketchbook on my iPad, where I can zoom in, make the note, zoom out, and draw some lines.
Nice.
You can also use Dynamo to do
Dynamo
sort of as well, if you want. So you can use a code block and just simply type in and process some of your logic flow in there. Like we actually have actively done that on the development team in the past as well.
That's interesting. Okay, so when IronPython goes to Python 3, can you speak to at all what the plan is on staying with Python 2 and Dynamo or moving to Python 3? Again, we know that we cannot make any purchasing decisions based on the information we hear, all those things.
So we can. So what we're actually doing is we're moving away from IronPython to CPython. And the reason for that is IronPython doesn't actually have a Python 3 expression yet. So it's under active mint, but there is no fixed sort of set time as to when that's going to be finished. So CPython is also a .NET applicable Python variant that is going to give you exactly the same access to the Revit API. Everything that you know and love from IronPython will be expressed through CPython. We're going to make sure that that experience is consistent. And they're going to provide a migration tool that's going to help you make changes and accept those changes to your graph as well. So you will actually be able to see some of this work ongoing if you do follow the PRs on side of our GitHub repo right now. The work is actively ongoing. We have no date I can give you on that front, but we are working on it, and the team is spending a lot of time and effort on this to make it the most sort of comprehensive and best experience possible. And the really beautiful thing about moving to Python 3 is all of those resources that you can find online on Python 3.org and stuff. They're going to make more sense now because there are some syntactical changes between Python 2 and Python 3 that will is sort of like the bread and butter of why we need to help you build this migration assistant and why you'll need to do a little bit of work to upgrade your Python from 2 to 3. But it is a brave new world as well. It opens up SciPy and NumPy and Keras and a whole bunch, PyTorch, TensorFlow, a whole bunch of really cool applications.
That's really exciting. Thanks for sharing. I don't follow those PRs, so that's cool. Let's see here. And someone else, I mean, kind of similar, but does the Dynamo team see Python as a coding language of choice for users? I think you kind of answered it, but does anybody want to elaborate on that?
You go ahead, Jacob.
I can elaborate a little bit. Python is amazing as kind of an entry-level language. What's I find super helpful about it. So I'm not a coder, right? I've opened Visual Studio 3 times in my life and just got too intimidated and walked away. But Python has a much easier sort of learning process and some great resources to sort of pick it up and understand the core concepts so that you can start to put them into play. What also is great about that is if I wanted to sort of reverse engineer and understand how that code works with the content that's been produced by the package authors such as Andreas Dykman and others, we can open up those custom nodes, look at the Python that's inside them, and start to analyze line by line to sort of take it apart backwards without totally breaking it. Unlike Visual Studio, where that's really, really complex and difficult to do. So it's a great learning tool, and why I'm really happy that we still have some of those Python nodes kicking
Yeah.
around in the packages, and not everybody migrated over to the zero touch, even though they do have a lot of advantages for developers.
And I know as a user, I mean, I've seen Python coming into the AEC industry really like significantly over the past few years. And so
Yeah.
I definitely, see that. Let's see here.
Yeah.
I think I've gotten most of the questions. Do you guys share graphs internally within Autodesk, and how do you do that?
Share as in like give to
Like, no,
something I
like
create.
internally when you're like working on Dynamo graphs. I mean, I know you guys are not, well, yeah. How do you share graphs internally? I know, I know this question could be just to the AEC like firms,
Yeah.
but I actually kind of want to specifically direct it to you. Do you guys share them? Do you just put them in folders and move them around? Do you have any other better
Right.
system?
So we typically use like Slack. We have OneNote. We have a bunch of different things that are probably similar to what you guys use, but we don't do coalface working Dynamo graphs the way that the industry does. At least I don't. I mean, maybe Jacob does. But so from my perspective, I just share one-on-one with people, or we have a common repository through something such as OneDrive.
Yeah. We do have some graphs that we share for support for kind of troubleshooting issues, where I develop something and it's like, hey, I solved this amazingly complex problem with this Dynamo graph. It doesn't interact with Revit in any way. You can just do it with Dynamo Sandbox, and identifies what the issue is, which is really helpful. And so we've taken to passing those around through team sites, Slack, for kind of like one-offs amongst sort of development. Here's my update. But when I've really needed a structure, GitHub's kind of the way to go. I have done a couple interactions with customers where a lot of back and forth, and they're editing this custom node, I'm editing that one. Who's got the latest? GitHub's been amazing for that.
Yeah, and there's actually a presentation from one of the speakers from AECOM who talked about how they did some GitHub interaction for their Dynamo parts of their Python nodes, and then they were able to kind of all work on it at the same time. And I think that's kind of an interesting workflow. We use GitHub for coding, but I haven't used it for like parts of Dynamo.
Yeah, so there is also a couple of extensions from the community. I know Andrea is watching today, so he has DynaHub, which you could go and check out as well, which I believe allows you to publish and download Dynamo graphs. There's also standard, which is more based around templates or starting pack stuff. So there's basically a huge amount of extensions out there that can start help you solving these problems. We haven't currently built an interface that allows you to, share graphs in the same way that you can share, say, custom node content. But it is something that we talk about, and it is something that could be happening in the future too.
Okay. I think we've gotten to most of the questions, or they've been answered in the chat. If I've missed one, go ahead and post it again or get those final questions in there. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this show, hit that like button so that other users know to watch this. And I know for myself, a huge thanks to you guys. Can you share a little bit about what you're enjoying about your work right now during this very kind of strange season during COVID?
Yeah, I'll start. So I had a planned trip to come visit my fiance here in Stockholm that was supposed to be 2 weeks, and it's turned into 3 months and ongoing, which has been quite nice. Beyond that, I've really liked how kind of the larger community has come together through events like this, where we're actually able to interact, I find, more than what we see with kind of the usual day-to-day basis, where people just, go to work, get on the train, go home, and then do the home thing. We're starting to reach out to each other more and developing more of that community, which is really good.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's been an interesting time because, like I said at the start, I lived in Canada for a year and a half in Toronto, flew down to Boston literally the day the border was closing. So this was my experience of like moving to Boston was weird because every other country I've lived in, place I've lived in, I've actually, I like exploring it. I like going out and seeing things. So I've basically been locked in a single flat here for like the last 3 months or so. And so that has been weird. As an extrovert, I lasted 3 days and I started going a little bit crazy on that one. But if it's flattening the curve and helping people, then I'm more than happy to do it. From the particular work perspective, I really enjoy the fact that like everybody who works at Autodesk is really keen to help, and like all we really want to do is try and enable the industry and get all of you guys and girls to like really reach all the potential that you can with our software, and then even as people. So like this kind of community outreach on your desk is awesome. We really enjoy presenting at AU and presenting at different conferences and running hackathons and all this kind of stuff. And it's really fun to be a part of a team here that really values the community and that really wants the community to be like one core tenet of what we do, especially in Dynamo. I mean, community is the pillar. It really is the foundation of Dynamo. Yeah. And so I get really excited when I see the community come together and build really cool things. And I get just as excited of seeing what people show me as what you guys will get from me showing you stuff.
Yeah. Well. So I want to answer the same question, but I do want to redirect this last question that did come in. Can you talk about documentation for the Dynamo API itself? I know it was mentioned in a previous talk a little bit, but can you speak about that?
Right. So we had, notice past tense, a Dynamo API site that is now a little bit out of date. There is a website called fuget.org, fuget.org, that basically will automatically scrape our NuGet packages, which is like the Dynamo DLLs, and showcase to you what available APIs we have. We're currently working
and maybe through... John can post that. I saw John Pearson, so I know he knows it, so maybe he can post it in the chat while you're talking.
Right. So we're working through right now what we're trying to clean up our APIs a little bit to showcase like what is supported and what we want to have supported moving forward, because if you have everything available, then we have to test every kind of interaction with that. And currently, like a lot of the Dynamo APIs give you too much in some ways. And so we're looking at how we could streamline that and be really supportive of good behavior that doesn't cause stability issues and crashes moving forward. So we have an intention eventually to build a proper API site that will be accessible. But as it stands, Fuget does a pretty good job auto scraping the DLLs to at least give you an understanding of what is available and what exists. And so some work that we're working on right now that we mentioned in the public roadmap recently, or say 6 months ago, was around Helix upgrades. So this is the background preview. Previously, some APIs associated with that John was actually using, and like Dynashape with Long Mugen was also using. We're cleaning up that interaction to try and take away not what they can do, but some of the other functionality potentially be unstable and cause issues for people if they wanted to access that. So currently, or previously, you had access to that. We're trying to streamline that process, and it's a way for us to build a more stable, more robust, better product in the end.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, thanks John for posting that. Thanks everyone for being a part of this. It's really been an incredible semester. There are a couple other questions. If we didn't get to your question, post it in the comments after we're done with live, and people can respond to that there. I do want to also say, this has been 20 shows, 20 episodes of what I'm calling semester number 1 for Your Desk University. It's been great. It's definitely been the highlight for me of this COVID season. We started because we wanted to connect this tech community, and we didn't see something specifically for this spectrum of computational designer to software developer as far as like this kind of connection series, and we are going to be doing a second semester. We've decided. We've already had speakers submit. We have actually a great list of speakers coming up. If you want to be part of that, go ahead and go to our website, go to the bottom, click the join us link. We'd love for you to do that, and we will try to pick the people who we believe will give you the highest quality product. And with that, I want to say cheers to the end of the semester. So thank you, Sol. Thank you, Jacob, for being a part of this. And thank you, everyone else. And we will see you later on. Join us in the Slack channel, where we'll have a little bit of conversation about what next semester might look like. And with that, bye, everybody.